they constitute together our people. So gymil magaf ganari live agus kagardagus agus rakin ereshkadi John leishin credila den last shuru. Thanks, John.
Ciaran agus grumad hain as do chud cheannacht le blian go leithe nuas. Ciaran there saying that the person is at the heart of it. I think our program has certainly put the person at the heart throughout today's conference. We're delighted to welcome up our first speaker, John Riordan. If you'd like to take the podium while I introduce you, I know you want to settle in. John is Director of Support at Shopify and Chairman of Shopify International. If you don't know what Shopify is, I bet you've used it dozens and dozens of times. Shopify is a global online platform that supports businesses to sell online. So anything you don't buy on Amazon, pretty much every chances are it was sold through Shopify. When the rest of us back in March 2020 were up in a heap trying to figure out how to transition from in-person working to remote working, people like John shrugged their shoulders because remote working has been part of their business, their successful business plan for years now. John leads a variety of customer support teams through groups based in Ireland, Canada, New Zealand and Lithuania, as well as teams in the Philippines, Japan and China. So you can't get much more remote than that. I know what they do works because out in Spiddle, where I live, my neighbour across the road left NUI Galway, a permanent pensionable job in NUI Galway 3 or 4 years ago to start working from home in Shopify. And he's really built a very happy, healthy lifestyle and work-life balance as part of that. So I know it works. Now, I think John's presentation today will really appeal to the 11% of people in the poll who are skeptical or concerned about team dynamics, because the title of his presentation today is Remote Working, a Success Story. So let's hear how they did it. John is also chairman, I should mention, of Grow Remote, an organization advocating for remote work. I expect that organization was very busy for the past year and a half. I've said lots of nice things that John wants you to hear. There's one thing I might mention that he may not want you to know. As a proud Munster man based in Cork, he once played rugby for Leinster. So remote working is a doddle compared to balancing. Work life is easy compared to Munster-Leinster rivalry. Okay, I'll hand over to John. Just so you know, we will have a Q&A. So if John prompts questions, please put them in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on them and I'll come back and put some questions to him at the end. Thank you, John, over to you.
Thanks, John. Accountant Online and Autonomy are companies that I would suggest that none of you probably heard of, at least not yet. Their owners, Larissa Feeney and Aidan O'Shea, respectively, are names you won't be familiar with either. They're not Google, they're not Facebook, they're not Apple, they're not even Shopify. But there are many people like Larissa and Aidan adapting and shaping their organizations around the new reality we face. And we need to take notice. Now, Larissa Feeney and her company, Accountant Online, help Irish startups and SMEs to launch, grow, and thrive by making financial and regulatory compliance simple. They have remote, hybrid, and flexible teams. And crucially, all their clients access them online, and all of their staff are offered remote work options. So what started as a trial in 2018 for Accountant Online has transitioned out of necessity, but seamlessly in 2020 and 2021. This was because their systems are cloud-based and critically, their focus is digital first. So why are they doing it? Well, they're offering remote work because they found that it was, quote, direct quote from Larissa, easier to find talent when we opened our vacancies to include remote options. And it's been easier to retain talent through using flexible remote working models. For their clients, a digital first approach from digital onboarding through the delivery of excellent service around the clock meant that there was absolutely no break in service during the pandemic. So I asked Larissa, how impactful has it been? We encouraged our team to embrace flexible working like 4-day work weeks, and it has helped us recruit excellent people and crucially retain key members. And it also promotes a trusting, empowered, and innovative team. Going almost completely remote forces us to constantly revise our processes to improve our client experience. Larissa now has 55 employees, with 20 in Donegal and others based in Dublin, Belfast, Derry, Cork, Kerry, Clare, Longford, Carlow, and she even has some Irish employees elsewhere in the world in Turkey, Japan, and Colombia. Quite a mix. Not everyone has a business up and running that they were able to redirect to home. Aidan O'Shea, who had recently departed a Cork-based call center outsourcing company called VoxPro, where he had been the CEO and had been a key part of the sale of VoxPro to TELUS International. Aidan and his wife were looking at their options and were toying with the idea of doing something in the remote space. March 2020 was the catapult shot for their idea to launch a fully remote call center outsourcing business. And so the company Autonomy was born. That's O-T-O-N-O-M-E-E. Now, Autonomy curiously believes in the power of yet. That new venture may not be global yet. That early stage company may not have thousands of customers yet. So to enable Aidan and Hilary to build from the ground up a fully remote outsourcing business, this in the past would have been referred to as a call center outsourcing operation or BPO. But March 2020 came along and empowered them, it enabled them, and it actually encouraged them to do this fully remote, unencumbered. So here now we have a serious player in the call center outsourcing business with significant experience, unencumbered by real estate costs, and powered by the newest technology advances, and espousing a working model remote, which is rapidly becoming their superpower. As Darwin hypothesized, and I am actually making up this quote, but the essence is actually correct, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, it's not the most intelligent that survive, but it's the one that is most adaptable to change. So watch this space. Remember this name, Autonomy, an Irish-based, purpose-built, remote-only, large-scale player, has not succeeded in this space yet. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Riordan, and as John embarrassed me early on in the introduction, I head up the Shopify operation here in Ireland, and I also serve as chairman of a wonderful organization called Grow Remote, a not-for-profit organization that's on a mission to enable us all to work, live, and participate locally in our communities, like John Caulfield's neighbor out in Spittle. We do this by making remote work via employment both visible and accessible. And this morning, I want to share with you my experiences with remote work and share what has worked for us at Shopify. So my first involvement with remote work was 20 years ago. I was living in the US and I was running the Virgin Atlantic Airways customer service operation. And I was at a Boston Red Sox baseball game as a corporate guest. And I fell into a conversation with another guest who told me through, to be honest with you, a smirk and a sneer that they'd been approached by an outsourcing company that wanted to handle all of his call center work using what was known in those days as teleworkers. And it was met with amusement bordering with mild derision by the group of people that we were with. Now, on the drive home that night, I couldn't get it out of my head that this idea of the gnarliest work problems that I face, the work tasks that we all face, like preparing budgets, writing speeches like this, doing reviews, all of the things that require, let's refer to deep focus, deep concentration. These are the ones I preferred to do and did more effectively when I did them from home. The penny dropped for me that night. So I ended up tracking down this company, and within 12 months, they were handling 50% of Virgin's business. And within 18 months, that was 100% of the Virgin Atlantic Airways customer service operation. Now, keep in mind, this was 2003. There was no broadband. These teleworkers, as they were known, each had 3 telephone lines, one for voice, one for data, and one for their mammy. Not even a mention of a national broadband plan here, folks, and no whining either. Now, 2 years later, I was approached by Apple to head up a project to bring rapid scalability to their online sales and service team by developing a remote work strategy. And what I really mean by this is I was just too damn stupid to understand that they were a year away from launching probably the most successful consumer electronics product ever, the iPhone. They needed to have a workforce that could handle wild volume fluctuations. What they were looking for was actually unimaginable at the time, but looking back, well, that's a very different story. Over the past 5 years, Apple has been averaging an iPhone sales figure of more than 200 million units a year. So just for context, in the 20 minutes that I'm going to be speaking today, Apple will sell approximately 8,000 iPhones and bring in about $10 million in revenue. So Apple truly embraced this whole concept of remote work way back in 2006. And now, just to give you a sense of the scale and the size of it, just Apple technical support, just the technical support, at some certain times of the year, they have in excess of 20,000 people working remotely around the world, both for them and for their outsourced partners. I spent approximately 11 years with Apple and some of their partner companies. And then in 2017, I got a phone call from a company called Shopify. Now, I have no interest in music, and I couldn't understand why this company was calling me until I realized Shopify and Spotify were two different things. I'd never heard of Shopify. And this company was telling me that they had 100 people working in Ireland, but they had no office. They mentioned the word remote. They got me right there. They got me at hello, rather they got me at remote. So let's rewind a couple of years. 2014, Shopify had started to grow beyond their North American base. They discovered they needed staff to work hours other than the standard 8 to 8 or 9 to 9 Eastern Standard Time in the US. The quick fix, of course, was an overnight shift. Easy to do, hard to master. And as most customer service people would know, the moniker of graveyard shift is truly justified. Staff join an overnight shift at the first available opportunity to get into a good company, and then they jump to the daytime hours as quickly as possible. The overnight shift rapidly becomes a revolving door of inexperienced and disillusioned staff, hence the term a graveyard shift. So then the next words said were, let's see if we can get people to work nighttime hours from home. And lo and behold, that started to resonate and it worked really well. So what Shopify did is they targeted a university town, Kingston, Ontario, which was within driving distance of the corporate headquarters. And they hit a really rich seam of talent. And the company kept growing. So the follow-on thought was, if it works here in Canada, surely it'll work elsewhere. We need a place in Europe, but they need to speak English. This was the battle cry. So a group of people, small group, came to Ireland and Scotland to have a look around. Galway, not surprisingly, was what caught their eye. Now, rumor within Shopify has it that it was heavily influenced by a deep and dark night in Noctons, followed by the rushing dove. And that is actually the truth, but we'll try to pretend that, so please don't repeat that. Anyway, the first group of 50 folks from Shopify started in the summer of 2015. So it was 50 people in 2015. When I joined in 2017, it had grown to 125, and most were still based in and around the Galway area. In 2018, we ripped off the Band-Aid and started hiring all over Ireland. We're now in all 26 counties of the Republic, and our staff numbers have continued to grow. In the last 5 years, we've grown fivefold, and we're now over 750 staff in Ireland, with 200 people in the Galway area. And most importantly, still to this day, we have no office. To put this into perspective, I asked the IDA in 2018, what size was the second largest purely remote, as in has no office, purely remote company that they have brought into Ireland? And surprisingly, back in 2018, the second largest company was a 15-person company. And at that stage, we were well north of 500 people. So since we launched in Galway, we've repeated this remote hiring process in New Zealand, initially basing ourselves in the Wellington area. And we've scaled that operation to over 300 people, again, crucially, with no office. So how timely is it that we're talking about this topic as COP26 comes to a close in Glasgow? We've all signed up to a significant reduction in carbon emissions. How about this simple one? Think for a moment and think about some, not all, of the commuters in just the Dublin area. This is CSO numbers from 2016. 32,000 people commute daily from Kildare into Dublin, 28,000 from Meath, 23,000 from Wicklow and Wexford. So 85,000 just from 4 counties, just 4 counties into Dublin. Let's do the mathematics on that. 10 trips a week, let's say 44 weeks a year, given holidays and sicknesses and whatever. Let's say 25 miles each. Just those people from just those 4 counties into Dublin, 1 billion miles traveled per year. Now, how do you think these commuters would answer the following questions? Do you spend your day, your work day at a desk? Yeah. Can you do large parts of your job from outside the office? Hell yes, I've proved it to you for the last 18 months, for God's sake. Would you prefer not to have to do this commute? And people are voting right now through their beliefs and their behaviors and their resignation, the great resignation that's going on. People are voting yes on that. So we've got clear and simple gains. And imagine what it would be like if we included all of the commuters into Dublin and all of the commuters who live in the county of Dublin. So enough context. It's time to dig a little bit deeper and talk to you a little bit more about Shopify and what we've done to set up and execute a very successful remote organization that continues to grow and continues to attract fantastic talent. I could wax lyrical on loads of things. I'm going to focus on 4 key areas. They are intention, dedication, communication, and trust. Let me first talk about intention. It's so much easier to build something from scratch. I referred to that earlier on when I was talking about Aidan O'Shea and autonomy. And rather than changing something in mid-flight, to do it from scratch. And I like to use the analogy of energy efficient housing. It's far easier to start from scratch than trying to retrofit. So when people join Shopify, they know they are joining what we refer to as a digital by design company. We weren't trying to change people's habits. We weren't trying to change their employment contracts or even their social contracts. They all knew what they were buying into. So we removed doubt and we now offer certainty. Second point is dedication. By deciding to not have an office in Ireland, we prevented the dreaded scenario of the haves and the have-nots. From an equipment perspective, we arm everyone with the requisite technology to do their job. In March 2020, when the rest of the company moved to remote, we gave everyone access to a website where they could order at company's expense, Herman Miller chair, electric standing desk, fancy camera, fancy high-end microphone. And a few weeks later, we then gave the staff a moiety of 2,000, an expense of 2,000 to kit out their office in any way they wanted, to help them build a homework environment that was optimal for them. Many Dyson fans later, many coffee machines, plants, wall hangings, etc., our employees were extremely happy. This might sound flash and it might sound exorbitant, but let me give you a financial perspective. The average cost of housing someone in a city center anywhere in the world is approximately 17,000 a year. No wonder the corporate landlords are trying everything to encourage a reopening at that price. We simply gave people everything they needed at Shopify, and we gave it to them once. So a one-time expense of 4,000 versus an annual expense of 17,000 per person per year. The mathematics don't lie. Next point is communication. Many of us have worked for years in multinational companies or know people who've worked in multinational companies, and they will gladly share their nightmare stories of being the only person dialing into a 10 p.m. audio conference call with everybody else in the conference room. It's a freaking nightmare. There's no way to dress it up. It's awful. So we focus on making communications that should work actually work. We probably communicate a bit too much, if there's such a thing. It's okay. I talk every single day with my direct reports. So far today, I have communicated with every single one of my direct reports, and I did that before 8 o'clock this morning. Our frontline teams meet for a huddle at the start and end of every day. We use a wide variety of tools for different messages. We use Slack, for example, to keep up to date and stay connected. If a message is longer than a certain amount, we take it to email. We use Google Meets, which is a version of Zoom and Teams, to chat. I average about 17 and a half hours a week of video calls, and done intentionally, it's very, very easy to handle. Great example of something that we do is we mandate a meeting-free Wednesday. Right there, a block in the middle of your calendar for the whole day, no meetings, time to get work done. Last point I want to talk about is trust. We don't just say we trust people, we actually trust them. The biggest manifestation of this trust is that we trust them to show up for work every day. Now, it sounds like an idiotic thing to say, but when I left Apple, I told a colleague I was going to work for Shopify in a fully remote role. All he could think of saying was, your golf game will definitely improve. Well, truth be told, it didn't, because for the last 5 years, I've played less golf than I ever have, and I've worked longer and harder than I ever have. Because with trust comes responsibility and accountability. And I've operated for the last 5 years in this world, and I spend more time getting people to get offline than trying to get people to come online. What you get in return for trust, real trust, is performance, lower attrition, and a robust and repeatable culture. So let me leave you with this thought. The market narrative right now is largely shaped by the major tech companies. 1 month before the pandemic, February 12, 2020, the Irish Times did a big splash reporting that Google, Amazon, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Salesforce between them were in the process of creating European campuses in Dublin for 36,000 employees covering 3.6 million square feet. These companies have made major commitments, both financially and to their staff, that they will be office-based. So there's going to be an element of hubris from these companies. We're too big to be wrong. We're big enough to make the market, and there'll be other such posturing happening. But what I want you to take away from today is that the future is likely to be disrupted by the likes of Shopify and the other pure play remote players of a smaller scale, but with real impact in local markets, just like Larissa Feeney's Accountant Online, along with Aidan O'Shea's Autonomy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Stay where you are. Folks, I'm delighted to say that John is staying up here because he's about to join a panel session, but I see a really good question has come in here from Niamh, a question I think that a lot of us can identify with. So I think when we all left the office to return and work from home back in March, we all thought, working from home, how am I going to get anything done? But the funny thing is, now that we're returning, some of us are asking, how did I get anything done in the office? There's so many coffees and catch-ups and meetups and, the day-to-day bumping into teams and seeing how they're getting on. So Niamh really here is asking, do you have any insights from the hybrid world about how to manage that? You mentioned that you've already communicated with your team this morning. You mentioned things like huddles. That sounds like a very structured approach to checking in with people. And I wonder, for Niamh's benefit, could you give us more sense of that, please?
I'll give you an example. I'll just compare two things. When I worked at Apple, I spent 7 years in the office in Cork. And well, yes, you have the great intention of going around and saying hello to everybody every morning and getting everybody in as a group and for a quick chat in the morning. I'd say it was a very infrequent thing. But the culture that I joined in the company was you talk to everybody every single day at the start of the day. And it's just what I saw happening around me. Everybody does it. When my leadership team comes on in Canada, I have multiple people reaching out, just basically kind of just a virtual wave. It's incredibly simple and it's the basics. And I actually find that the basics are easier to do in the online worlds than they were actually to do than in the real world. That sounds like a bizarre thing, but when you've worked in both, you'll understand.
I guess it becomes the new normal that we keep talking about. Another question here from Helena, and that is around how do you encourage your teams to have a real work-life balance? So you mentioned there that you actually have to kind of encourage them to switch off. What are the types of things or supports or structures or processes that Shopify do to make sure that that happens?
I used the term intent earlier on. We start with intent. So when we do training, we bring people in for 6 weeks and we have a very structured online training program. We literally shoot people away at 4 o'clock in the evening. They come on and they 8 hours of let's say coursework and learning. We do not want people staying on after 4 o'clock to try to catch up. We shoo them away, we get them away, and we encourage them to do other stuff, non-work stuff. That's the first thing. Secondly, which is a little bit bizarre for some companies, we encourage everybody to have a side hustle. Because we're an entrepreneurial organization, we encourage people and we incentivize them to actually open a Shopify store so they actually have something else to do outside of work. Now, of course, it's self-serving because if they end up opening a Shopify store, they are actually far better able to support other people in that. But that actually is a mental break from the work. So it's down to intent.
Very good. Thank you, John. John, will you take a seat here because you're staying up here? I hope Kieran was listening. Kieran, are you going to encourage us all in NUIG to have a side hustle? Is that what you call it, John?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out. Okay. Can I invite up our first panel of the day, please? Led and chaired by Professor Alma McCarthy, who is our Professor of Public Sector Management. I think we're all interested in that today. And Alma is our head of our J.E. Cairns School of Business and Economics. Alma's research interests include such things as public sector leadership, human resource development, training, work-life balance. I think we're going to hear that a lot today, 360-degree feedback.